There wasn't a single moment in speaking to any of them that I felt like they wanted to talk to me about where the price of Bitcoin was. The builders now have to finally focus for the first time in maybe ever working in crypto on building things that people actually may want.
I think everybody's realizing that regardless of what you think about crypto, it's the technology that makes settlement easy, that makes it possible to do 24/7 subscriptions and redemptions into a fund, that produces a level of transparency and programmability we haven't had before.
There's definitely more institutions coming into DeFi, and we're definitely seeing that. And I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what startups do, right? They come in and they do something that's never been done before.
I think for this ECC, we definitely met a lot of like enterprise representative, and they were like less kind of like suit up, but they were more interested also like in understanding the tech stack. Long-term adoption was very interesting, and we need to understand fast how Web3 can be leveraged for actually an AI-specific offering.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Onchain Honestly,
a podcast about what actually works in crypto as a business.
We're long-term believers in this space, and we want more honest conversations about what's changing and why.
So we explore real models, practical outcomes, and what it takes to build something that lasts.
Hello everyone, and hi Kaiser. How are you? What's up?
Hi Alenka. I'm really good and excited to kick off this episode.
So am I. God, how much effort and time we put into it. Took us quite a while to record all these interviews and put them together, didn't it?
It did. We had quite some different guests over from different backgrounds to give this perspective about the current state of the crypto market.
Yeah, and maybe just to give our listeners a bit of context, when we were planning the first episodes of the show, we really felt like starting with fundamentals, with broad topics like what exactly is going on in the industry, what people are thinking, what they're afraid of, what they're concerned about, and what they're expecting in the near future. And then it all sounded very theoretical and broad, and we didn't quite like it. And we're looking for an anchor, either a guest, either a very particular angle, or maybe a particular occasion. And that moment coincided with the period of those 4 or 5 amazing days that I spent at EthCC in Cannes, France, for my favorite Ethereum conference. And when I came back and started sharing all my thoughts and insights and feelings with Kaiser over a call, we felt like that could be that exact anchor we had been looking for.
Yeah, crypto conferences in general are very good touch points for the whole industry. And to start our every conversation from the same point, but including a lot of different voices, gives us quite a holistic perspective, I think.
Exactly. And so we talked to Anya, who is director of EMEA at Galaxy Digital, Francesco, head of developer relations at MetaMask, Simon, who leads product marketing at Gauntlet, and last but not least, Azeem, co-founder at Miden. All right, let's begin. So we now have Azeem with us, co-founder at Miden, previously focused blockchain. Azeem, so I think you also noticed it that, the X and LinkedIn feed was absolutely full of a lot of like reflections around EthCC right after that. And your LinkedIn post in particular attracted my attention pretty much, where you were saying that, the only guys that seem to be really deeply caring about what's going on in crypto and blockchain are the institutional guys, which was, pretty interesting idea and definitely, reflective of what's going on. So could you please expand on it a bit?
Yeah, totally. So I ended up doing Digital Asset Summit and the EY Global Blockchain Summit the week before EthCC. So it was sort of one after another. And at DOS, I met with, a lot of the institutional folks and was fortunate enough to be on stage, on the main stage at Digital Asset Summit on a co-fireside with Amy Oldenburg, who's the head of digital assets at Morgan Stanley. And so I spent all week just chatting with all of the different institutions, Franklin Templeton, Invesco, UBS, literally all of them. And the conversations were honestly purely around tech. They were around regulations. They were around, what kinds of things are going to be enabled, what kind of things make sense to tokenize versus what things don't make sense to tokenize. But there wasn't a single moment in speaking to any of them that I felt like they wanted to talk to me about where the price of Bitcoin was, or that, ETH is at, I don't know, 20, I don't actually know the price of ETH, but like 2,500, 200, 2,900, whatever it is, right? There wasn't a single person who wanted to talk about that. It was primarily them being excited at what institutions are thinking about, what institutions are looking to enable. Like I spoke with people on multiple teams over there at DOS about, some of the things we're doing around privacy. And before this, it wasn't long ago that as much as people understood privacy was important, right away they would be like, oh no, privacy means, North Korea or something like that, right? Like we can't handle privacy. Now they're meaningfully trying to see what would it mean to bring privacy on board. And then I got to EthCC and like there were a lot of good conversations around, what's going on in DeFi, for instance. And I would say that the event was much leaner compared to the last few years. I didn't go last year in con just because it was in July and I did not want to be there in July in a place where they don't love air conditioning. But I'd gone the year before that in Brussels. I went the year before that when they did it in Paris. And so it was a much leaner event. You could tell like we're in the middle of a bear market, and so teams are only sending the most important people. The events were much more subdued. I heard that last year in Cannes they had a bunch of super expensive events that were happening at like the expensive places on the beach. It was not like that this time. It was a lot of like very chill stuff. But it was just most people talking about, the bear market and what do we need to do to get out of it, and jokes about, when things will finally be flush again with money. But it was just a general sentiment that I found. I was at Dawson, no one cared about where the prices are. And even on stage with Amy, the thing that we were talking about was this like super interesting thing where there's this contraction going on in crypto native markets. We're seeing layoffs at every company, right? We're seeing companies having a really hard time raising to the point that crypto VCs are getting online and pretending like they're still allocating capital. They're like giving all these tweets saying all the things they're doing, but they're not really. And we're seeing companies shutting down as well. And then you go and you see it more on LinkedIn, but you see Morgan Stanley's hiring more, and they just launched their Bitcoin ETF, and BlackRock is hiring, and Franklin Templeton's hiring, and Fidelity is hiring, and everyone's increasing the number of positions that are available. And they're with way more nuance now. It's not just we need a blockchain person, but they know exactly what they need. They've made good hires, they've made good acquisitions. They're constantly thinking like, do we buy, do we partner, do we or do we build for the kinds of things that we need? And then you go and you sit down with the crypto native folks, and it's just about, you know, prices and bear market and things like that. And it was just, I sat down and I was like, wait, like, I enjoyed my conversations way more when I was at DOS sitting down with the institutional folks. But like, these are supposed to be like the sharks, right? These are supposed to be the people who don't care about anything except making money. And they're the ones who are like, pure about the tech. They're like, wow, like look, think about all the things that this is going to enable. And so I haven't been able to stop thinking about that, honestly. The irony of it.
Yeah, that's actually super insightful. And yeah, I have like two questions, reflecting on what you just said. Like, first of all, maybe if you could expand a bit how, these conversations have shifted or influenced your own strategic thinking about the space, but, also that of Miden.
So I'd say for us, it hasn't as much. I'd say, I ended up officially joining Miden. I was one of the late stage co-founders. And so the team had been building for a long time, had been fundraising, and some of the VCs who were part of the round had reached out to me early in 2025 while the fundraise was still very actively going on, saying that they were investing in a team that they felt were technically brilliant, and that, they knew I was looking for what I wanted to do next, and they thought that it would be worth having a conversation. And so from the time that I read the investment memo and chatted with the team, I said, guys, if we're doing compliance and privacy simultaneously, we're not going to be able to create some sort of speculative gambling product that's going to make as much sense. It's just, I don't want to figure out how to create our own version of like meme coins or something like that, right? And or like ICOs. There's always like this new skin on how to do unregulated gambling in crypto. Said from the start, like it's going to make sense for us to onboard institutions. And even at the time that I was looking at joining, I had been thinking about doing a variety of other things. I'd been speaking to some TradFi companies, I'd been talking to market makers, to venture funds, to different protocols, and I'd also been writing for different publications about how sort of the institutions are coming. And when I sat down and looked at Miden and I said, wait, like institutions can't come without privacy. This is going to make the most sense. And so, sort of what's happening now, and we still have a lot of work to do. We're going to mainnet this summer. We have many deals. We've been having conversations about things that aren't done yet. But if anything, it has only furthered, our confidence in knowing that we have an idea of where things are headed. Because, when I was looking at joining, I had a lot of people I know in the industry who were like, "Are you sure you want to join a zero knowledge company? Like ZK hasn't been cool for years." Like, and I was like, "No, like this is where things have to go." And so I don't think that it shifted much of our thinking. If anything, it's only made it easier because now when I speak with executives at TradFi companies, they're talking about how it's not gonna take forever to get a deal done because these things are like top of mind to them and they're moving faster. As opposed to in the past, it would take forever to get done with them.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, and like the second my question ties also a little bit into that, because you mentioned you had these like very great conversations with these more institutional folks, and then at EthCC you kind of felt a bit more of this typical crypto price talk maybe.
Hmm.
So, and we also touched a little bit upon quite big firings, but at the same time institutions are looking for very quality people. So I guess my question is, what role do you see actually crypto native builders play in today's ecosystems? And also maybe what's like the biggest gap between what institutions say they want, but what they actually buy?
Makes sense. So I would say the builders now have to finally focus for the first time in maybe ever working in crypto on building things that people actually may want. To date, it's been this really interesting playground where you could sort of build anything and get access to funding. But now a lot of things are well developed. If you're trying to raise money for a new stablecoin, let's say, it would be like trying to raise money for a Facebook competitor in 2015, where it's like there's well established people, the market is mature, and it's sort of like this across the board. If you want to build bridges, if you want to build chains, anything you want to do. And so builders are having to think much more and be more thoughtful in what it is that they want to go about building and why it is those things make sense. A lot of the data has been showing, at least for 2025, that venture funds are making much less bets across the board, but those bets are more concentrated. And so they're investing in more growth stage companies and less pre-seed and seed deals are actually getting done. And so builders have to be much more thoughtful about any of those things. I think that's been the biggest thing that I've noticed is that prior to this, you could sort of say you were doing anything, and if it sounded interesting enough, there was money to go around. That's simply just not the case anymore. And I think that's good, to be honest. I think that it's a sign of the fact that the industry is maturing in a way that we actually need. Because prior to this, there was a token game that you could sort of run the playbook on, and people would just print money. It was just, the being able to go to the exchanges and the market makers and knowing how to use the KOLs, and like there's a whole strategy that people understood that you needed to do, and they would just print money, and you just can't do that anymore. Now almost every company is reassessing whether or not token makes sense. Like for us, like we're not going to be launching a token when we go to mainnet because it just doesn't make sense in this market. There's so much that we have to think through. There's regulations passing that we're waiting on seeing sort of what they say. For that, we're just like very thoughtful about what it means when token comes. So I think builders across the board are having to think more about this. It's not just like, yeah, as long as we can get a Binance listing and we can get these KOLs on board, like we can, treasury manage away millions of dollars. I think the biggest thing I've seen, because we've been intentional about this from the start, is instead of building solutions and then looking for problems, we have been talking to institutions from the moment that I onboarded to understand what they're looking for. And I would say the institutions have been pretty clear about the things that are interesting to them or the things that they want, like stable coins. They can't stop talking about stable coins. And if you're building something that makes sense on stablecoins, it's why was it Rain Cards recently raised 250 million at a 2 billion valuation, I think. And we're seeing all these things happening with the crypto like sort of debit card companies and Visa, and everyone is doing their own version of it. And then we've seen like Pay is one of the ones recently raised like a $6 million round to try to do that privately. And so they've said exactly what it is that they're looking for. And I think that they're constantly on stages now or doing podcasts talking about the things that they think are important. And if anything, I think it's just been that the builders have been slow to catch on to pay attention to that and be able to understand how they think that they can build things that are actually complementary or make sense. Because across the board, we're seeing, if you're building something that they want, everyone's buying companies right now. Do I think this will last forever? No, absolutely not. But at the moment, all of the financial institutions are thinking through build, partner, buy. And for a lot of the things, build isn't the way that they're going about doing it. It's partnering and buying. And so for me, is there's a lot of builders who see that. Was it BVNK got bought by, was it MasterCard a few weeks back?
It was
One,
Mexico, yeah,
right? Like
1.8 bill.
1.8 billion, right? Like Stripe has made multiple massive acquisitions. Like, Coinbase has made massive acquisitions. Like we're seeing sort of like across the board companies. I was sitting with the Kraken team a couple weeks back at DOS, and I was meeting with one of the founders of Magna, one of like the token investing companies. Like Kraken purchased that, or my friend Lindsay who ran Hedgie, which was another token investing platform. Like Anchorage bought that, and so there's the builders who see where things are going. I think are finally having like a good moment.
Yeah, that's I think very good tip for the builders here. Alenka?
No, I mean, I thought that was very to the point, and Azim, thank you a lot for the insights. And actually, like all of them really resonate because I was observing all that myself at EthCC as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, was very happy to hear it from your side.
thank you.
Hi, Anya. Thank you very much for joining, and it's very nice seeing you again. I think we had a very insightful panel back at EthCC, and given the mission and the original focus of Galaxy on like blockchain and institutional clients, I bet it wasn't your first EthCC. So if you've attended before, did you feel any difference this time?
Yeah, same here. Very happy to be here. Nice to see you again. It was my second time. I've really enjoyed both times. I thought the audience changed a bit, became a bit more institutional. I found last year and this year was really fantastic.
Right, but then how large was your presence overall from Galaxy's side? Was it only you?
No, we had a few people. We're pretty large firm, more than 700 people now. Most of us are in New York, so it's a bit of a trek to get to Europe. But we had people from custody, staking, product, lending team, market making team. So it was really well represented.
Right. But in terms of, this crypto native conferences, because EthCC is definitely one, right? It was one of the first Ethereum focused conference from day one, essentially. Is it, a common practice for Galaxy to attend such events in general?
I mean, we've been around for a long time, and one of the things that we are really good at is actually combining the crypto native expertise and the institutional expertise, right? That's probably what makes us really unique in this space, is that we do offer services through our digital asset platform that spans anything from advisory, where we work with banks, asset managers, helping them identify their tokenization strategy. And then at the same time, we have DeFi projects, we have a staking business, we have restaking business now. So we really well plugged in. So attending a conference that might be considered just a crypto native conference is still extremely useful for us because we work very closely with people building in this space.
That's actually very interesting. And you several times mentioned this institutional angle, which I think is the hot topic right now. Maybe if you don't mind to dive in a bit deeper, where the industry is right now from your perspective. You said you are offering some strategic help. How big is the interest? Who are the players?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You might have seen some of our recent announcements with State Street, for example, where we're launching a tokenized fund with them. They've chosen us as their partner to do that. Last year, we've launched a stablecoin, Euro stablecoin, together with DWS. So that's a Deutsche Bank asset manager. We've done things like tokenized CLOs. We've done a commercial paper with JP Morgan. So I think the interest is actually really quite high. I think everybody's realizing that regardless of what you think about crypto, it's the technology that makes settlement easy, that makes it possible to do 24/7 subscriptions and redemptions into a fund, that produces a level of transparency and programmability we haven't had before. So I think everybody is realizing that implementing these features into the product stack will really improve the level of service and the quality of the product, financial products that we're able to offer.
Right, and then Anya, you also mentioned DeFi as an area of your focus, right? So I was just wondering whether you work directly with, crypto native builders per se, like, those DeFi teams that might be offering like very general purpose products. Do you manage to find synergies with them in particular?
Well, I think there is always ongoing communication. We have DeFi experts in house, but they are contributing and learning from the broader ecosystem. So yeah, I think we're very well plugged into the Ethereum, Solana, DeFi ecosystems, and we're exploring others as well.
Right, so we're definitely very concerned, for those crypto native guys that are now feeling a bit lost given this institutional coming to the industry. So that's essentially where my question is coming from.
Yeah, but I think it's actually, a marriage made in heaven because DeFi traditionally has been very strong on technology, and TradFi has been very strong on risk management. And bringing those two things together, we will just end up with better financial system, better financial rails.
100%. It's, the matter of finding the right synergies and again, not really losing hope, because I think there are so many, talented people, even from this crypto native angle, that will definitely find some touching points and collaboration opportunities with such players as you, very institutional focused. What's next for you, Anya? Any upcoming conferences you're attending?
I think I'm going to take a break. Just
Well
a few
deserved.
weeks. Yeah. I've been traveling, every other week, so I think it's time to relax.
Anya, thank you so much. That was very insightful.
Yeah, very good to see you.
Hi, Simon. So great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You've recently come back from EthCC Cannes, and there's been a lot of discussions around this event on crypto Twitter. So how was EthCC for you this time? Did you feel any substantial difference between this version and the previous ones? Very curious to hear the perspective of Gauntlet, one of the largest risk curators in the space, where you lead the product marketing direction.
Sure thing. So I think this was my fourth EFCC. I think I missed Brussels, but I did the two beforehand in Paris, and I did the two in Cannes. So I kind of have the French comparison of both. I really love this edition. I think April was perfect weather, first of all, because a lot of the complaints from last year were due to the heat, which was quite burdensome. And this year, I think I had my personal experience, and maybe it's selection bias, but I had a really good time overall at EFCC. Really good conversations. Lots of our partners came. Really felt like the focus was on vault and yield, which is perfect for us. And then finally, I felt like there was this shift to institutional focus. Now, there are trade-offs to that, and it's interesting because everyone's talking about institutions and everyone's like trying to go institutional in terms of targeting. And so there's a lot of people talking about institutions at those events and at FCC. And because there's still like a big imbalance between the supply and the demand. There's definitely more institutions coming into DeFi, and we're definitely seeing that. But the space is really indexing a ton in that direction. So I'm also interested in how that's going to play out. And finally, compared to last year, I really feel like the meta in terms of events is kind of like moving more towards what a Dev Connect is like, which is there's a lot of like satellite one-day events happening, as opposed to like last year where it was concentrated around the main venue and there were like only a few events around. And then I will also say that like this FCC kind of felt like bear market FCC, which is it's a lot of the companies that are like building, surviving, that usually have more of a war chest that are around, that are bigger, that have more resilience. Whereas last year, there were a lot more variety and diversity in projects, but also the quality was more spread out, and the size of those companies was more spread out.
Very interesting perspective, actually. I never thought about it, like proximity to Dev Connect, as you said, in terms of this one-day events, but it's actually, it does sound so true. I just didn't really notice it last week. But yeah, so the question is like, I really loved your point on this institutional shift, and I'm just wondering how exactly it is currently reflected on Gauntlet's strategy, right? Because what I'm seeing is that you guys have been really focusing on very different types of audiences, right? And then just originally you had your own marketplace with vaults, obviously having those vaults on Mofo and then ultimately Camino as well, right? But then you shifted towards offering it to the clients of Wirex, for example, right? Or your recent appearance in Cast, the neobank, which is essentially aimed at retail. But now with this institutional shift, what exactly does it mean for you?
Look, I think there's both. I think there's two big areas of growth overall in the space. The first one is increasing. It's basically growing the pie for retail, which is especially in the bear market. Like everything in DeFi is pretty PvP. Like all the users that have stable coins are in vaults pretty much already in vaults. And so I think the interesting part about what you mentioned, which is Cast, and integrating with more fintechs, is to provide yield to an audience that didn't, well, on-chain yield to an audience that didn't have access to it before. There's this one area of growth, and the other area of growth is like as institutions come on board, they want to work with trusted partners. They want to work with companies that have been around for a long time. We've had some very early institutional partnerships, especially like with Apollo coming in and companies like that. And Falcon X, for instance, so I think having both and working with both is interesting. And I think this institutional shift also is an area of growth, but we shouldn't forget that like DeFi is all about also like providing yield to like on-chain yield to end users, and making it accessible for those end users. And I think those integrations are key. Like we work with Privy as well. We work, as you mentioned, we work with Cast, we work with Virex, we work with those integrators that kind of like unlock the next step of kind of like adoption to an audience that not necessarily completely on board and into DeFi. And it's kind of like growing the pie of DeFi as opposed to like going after, competitor market share or trying to get like people to supply into your created vault as opposed to other created vaults. It's just this shift is really interesting for us, like in both aspects. And institutions, they're kind of a different ball game overall. Like they have a way longer cycle. There's a lot more due diligence. There's a lot more considerations. And obviously they look at things like, and same for the integrators, but they look at, track record, who you've worked with before, things like that. And how long you've been in the space, and the size of your team, and what experience your team has in terms of strategy. And so it's been really good for us, and especially in the context of like EthCC as an event pulling institutional weight. It also allows us to go and like actually meet partners in person. Before, maybe it was more of a pure DeFi event with a lot of protocols, but now it's drawing more of the institutions. It's also like a good way for us, as Gauntlet working with these companies to kind of like catch up and build on these relationships.
Right, but then, Simon, if you're saying that institutions obviously prefer like established players with the risk like managed in a perfected form, right? Because obviously they care about it to be able to offer it to their clients like calmly and in a very secure way. Then what can like ordinary builders do? What can they essentially build at this point if it's so hard to to kick it off and to build from scratch?
You mean build from scratch for institutions?
I mean, like just imagine a new startup in the space, right? Willing to tap into, well, digital asset infra in general as a space, right? And then what they want to build something new. So what can they build at all if those institutions that are coming into the space and that are becoming our key clients now, I mean, how on earth would they pick a new startup over an established firm?
That's a great question. I think there are other areas, and there are some interesting developments in the DeFi space, that are like just genuinely new because the tech is new, and so therefore it's not like Lindy's going to make a difference in terms of like how long they've been in the space, because just no one's been long enough in the space. Like I'm talking, for instance, like agentic DeFi. We partner with a few companies in agentic DeFi to help like agents access or yield strategies, for instance. And some institutions will pursue those avenues and will want like more that AI edge, probably. And so I think there's still interesting areas for Builder to, come in and innovate. And I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what startups do, right? They come in and they do something that's never been done before, and they differentiate, and they bring something new to the market that provides value. And then, you know what? They can plug in to institutions through us. Like we partner with some agentic platform. And so at the end of the day, like they can access the yield. And if an institution comes in and is like, well, you know what, like I want my users to have access, or like my LPs to have access to AI agents that actually pick the best yield, then we can all work together on a solution like this. Yeah, I really think it's an interesting space, this intersection of AI and DeFi. And I think it's reaching a spot where it's becoming a lot more solid. And I think the key is really going to be like differentiation in terms of like AI decision making for like DeFi opportunities. But like for instance, like we work with Giza, and I really like how their agents are actually like navigating around, picking the yields, picking the risk adjusted yield that matches the user preferences. There's some kind of like filters that you can put on top with like curators, types of vaults, DeFi platform that you can go in, and like those companies and those startups bring new innovation that could be attractive to institutional players.
Right. Okay, so to cut a long story short, nothing has really changed. Startups should continue experimenting and just, maybe picking very thoroughly the niche that you really want to tap into, where you have large experience and a great idea to kind of disrupt the area. Simon, thank you so much. That was a very valuable input.
Thanks a lot, Alenka. Thanks for having me.
Ciao, Francesco. How are you today?
Hello, all good. How are you guys? Everything okay?
Yeah, everything's great on our side. Look, it's so hard to imagine an Ethereum conference happening without the famous and signature Builders Nights by Francesco, the head of developer relations at MetaMask. And this year wasn't an exception, of course. Did you feel any difference this year?
Look, yeah, I mean, ECC definitely like felt different. I mean, we kind of like went from like 400 or 500 side events to kind of like 100, 150. But I think at the end, like, the sentiment was clear. I mean, the city is a totally different vibe, even if it was like a different period. But I think like there were strong like builder sentiment for a specific use case. We definitely saw a lot of like let's say AI overlapping and tracing. I tried also to kind of like go out more on the out of the comfort zone. Like we had some Cloud Ambassador, Cafe Cursor happen also like during ECC. But I think like there is also like a clear shift around enterprise appetite. Like I think like was both after DAS and even ECC last year we saw a lot of enterprise like people suit up. There was a clear kind of like clash and onboarding. I think for this ECC, we definitely met a lot of like enterprise representative, and they were like less kind of like suit up, but they were more interested also like in understanding the tech stack. Long-term adoption was very interesting. I cannot talk much like who I met, but we talk really with kind of like representatives speaking about general like agent stack, multi-chain kind of like API suites. It was very interesting because I think like on enterprise level, the mandate is extremely longer than just a bull bear market. So the cycle is actually longer, especially in B2B, right? That was very interesting to see that on the enterprise side, there is a lot of the option. And on the builder side, the sentiment is what it is. But I think people are focused on very critical use case. Like we saw payments, we saw stable, we saw a lot of like developer tooling for agent. We're assuming that 6 to 12 months, half of our consumer will not have a face, right? So if we're actually start to speak about agentic commerce, we can deep dive more into like all this A004 standard topic. We can deep dive more in this new standard that also like David and the AI team is pushing around agentic commerce. A lot of interesting angles. I don't know how you were also there. How was the kind of like appetite for you? Like, did you felt this was another very different like ECC? I would love also to know your kind of like feedbacks.
Look, I totally agree with your points. And I felt that, builders' sentiments, even at your own event, were super different this time from the previous version, right? Like I saw a lot of people disappointed and lost, but I don't really want to ruin, this positive vibe that you've just brought up. So yeah, I mean, Kaiser, since you have not been there, are you interested to learn maybe more specifics about, what kind of talks we had there? Just, fire away with your questions.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Thanks, for this very comprehensive insight also from, maybe more builder side of how these events went. And yeah, I actually have quite some questions. And, maybe just to start off with, if, I don't know, you could maybe describe a bit more in depth, with having these, you mentioned a bit, having more suits in the rooms, and institutions is a very broad term, of course, but maybe if you could give a bit more insight into what are they actually looking for when they come and join these spaces, and if that anyhow impacts maybe your own team's strategy, maybe the strategy in general when developers, what are they building, or what do they should seek to build now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good point, right? Like, I mean, obviously, like strategy is shifting extremely fast. We see obviously like a lot of like adoption on, from docs to developer offering to product offering, adoption for like agent offering. I think like the major like interest was on the enterprise side is I mean, apart the kind of like M&A space, I think is like warming up more and more. We see also like more acquisition, more kind of like distribution channel and product M&A type of things, even acqui-hire. But one interesting part is I definitely had more discussion around product tooling and how we adapt also onboarding, broader onboarding for companies that already like have distribution channels and merchant relationships, right? How this is shifting on kind of like our team size, I think it's mostly about start to think about we need to onboard agentic commerce and the agent players. So also adapting, for example, like we did again like another like docs revamp. We are rebuilding our full kind of like also like restructuring our full offering to make it actually more compelling for different target audience. I think like if you see right now on the MetaMask docs, you see also like we are fully kind of like LLM compliant. Not only we like submit a bunch of like skills and different like CLI that are consumable for from from kind of like other external parties, but also like the fact that you don't need to kind of like invoke every time new docs, new context. You can literally like take a page and run it directly with your kind of like favorite LLM. So I think like the time to hello world, the time to market, it's shortened up again and again, right? Before we were like spinning up like with some kind of like mono repo, a demo, then you were building on top of it. Now basically like people want to get directly have context-based solution. And I think like the space is even moving fast. And one thing is very clear is that obviously we're going in the direction of having super dApps. But also it's very clear that there is a lot of like product slop. I don't know how you call it, right? I see a lot of crypto Twitter happening right now, but kind of like product AI slop being kind of like shipped. Mm-hmm. And I think like what is very relevant is whoever has distribution, whoever have this kind of like merchant relationship, deeper merchant relationship, I think is kind of like the winner here. And I think like we see a lot of consolidation around this part of like the business. And I think also like the way how user are actually behaving is very different than 1 years ago, right? Like if I'm thinking like one very interesting use case, for example, the Francesco DeFi is always going, I don't know, to run in different platform, do some on-chain transaction, different platform. But where I see like consumer behavior today is that people want to stay in kind of like single platform. I give you also an example. Like we saw a lot of like people, transacting with both MetaMask and other wallets and going actually placing bets on Polymarket. After we kind of like set up kind of like the bar full integration with Polymarket and placing those bets inside the extension was very interesting that people are actually staying there and placing the bet directly there. And same is happening for perps. And it's very interesting because I always assumed, people were moving and kind of like following the best path, the best kind of like way possible, even cheaper way possible on multiple platform. But I think the customer behavior is moving in like, okay, I want to have an effortless UX experience. I want to have kind of like, I kind of like don't care. I just want to have everything in one place. And I think like where the market is going, we always assumed that the DeFi user will remain the same. But I think also we are onboarding more and more consumer or just, could be even like agents, but we are onboarding more just more ecosystem that are used to also like neobanks, Web2 ecosystem, Web2 UX. And I think that's where I kind of excited about. I think also Khan gave a lot of like fresh air instead the sentiment, not because Khan is also beautiful, but also like the fact that there were a lot of discussion about onboarding, how we actually get into real masses onboarding. And we kind of like started to see kind of like a bit away from our, okay, this is just crypto. And I think also it's something that has been forced. Right now, we don't have kind of like the luxury to say, hey, this is what happening with AI and this is what happening with Web3, right? Like things are overlapping and we need to understand fast how Web3 can be leveraged for actually an AI specific offering. That's why I'm excited about specific discussion around the A004, on-chain attestation. When we're speaking about, know your agent kind of product, we go more around like this kind of like ZK and privacy offering. ZK Passport, for example, is doing a great job. There is, I think, a lot of like on-chain verification fundamentals that we can leverage for building better AI paradigm. But in the same time, it's all about distribution too, right? We don't kind of like need to maintain ourselves kind of stubborn and saying, hey, AI will definitely like embrace some Web3 shifts around attestation. I don't think this is happening unless we actually go out of the comfort zone. And I think like you see that as a consequence. You see also like more companies joining not just a general like payment conference like Money 2020, Web Summit, but I think also like there is definitely like a self-awareness that we know we need to go out in other like industries, and I think we're forced to right now because we hear people like obviously leaving. We hear people, but in the same time there are very like I don't know, green signal, like the payments, stable issuance is also like increasing still months to months. And I feel also like this discussion happening because we are in very specific markets. But for example, like I don't know, I'm traveling 6, 7 times in Nigeria and people will not debate the use case of like stablecoin, right? It's kind of like a no-brainer. And those things are making me excited when you actually see, Brazilian neobanking, even Argentina stablecoin issuance. You see a lot of like specific use case that definitely have PMF. The question here is only if this is fast enough, but in the same time, I see also a lot of strong appetite around enterprise offering and kind of like enterprise embracing the technology side. And yeah, I mean, basically like distribution is what happens. I think like, there were a lot of like discussion point around the new mandate, the focus around privacy and cyberpunk value. But I think we need to kind of like have an higher have an higher kind of like side of what is happening today. And there is specific PMF, there are challenges, there is people coming and going out, but I think also ultimately we will see also like adoption and a true overlapping of things. And we see that in the DevX generally. We see that in the builder adoption. I'm definitely like seeing a lot of crawling those days, both on our docs, on Builder Hub, on that is run also done by agent. I think how the general the general consumer behavior is clearly shifting. We will have consumer kind of like giving task and managing wealth in behalf through agents. So the human will still have kind of like the agency side, but I think how you do it, the instrument are definitely like evolving. And that's why we need to just build for consumer. We need to think also how to build specific instruments that are actually like agent friendly. And things are moving fast, right? I think in the past 6 months we saw so much changes happening in the space that I saw in the past like years. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Look, guys, I will need to actually count how many times Francesco has pronounced the word consumer, but which I'm very happy because it still, gives a lot of hope that we are going to achieve this mass adoption at which we've always been aiming. Francesco, thank you so much for all these insights.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. Hopefully like we see each other maybe in Paris or Miami, and let's have more like builder talks, builder adoption, and agentic conversation.
And this is it. 4 different people, 4 different perspectives. Kaiser, what did you personally think about it? What are the main takeaways for you?
I think I liked the idea that it was said out loud that the bar is higher. It's higher for builders. It's higher for all the participants in the ecosystem. And I also like the connotation that it's a good thing. It gives ground for more sustainable businesses to be built, for business models to be tested out, to find the product market fit. So I think for the industry, it's a really great thing. And so the fact that this is being mentioned is great.
Very true. And all our guests seem pretty much aligned on that. To me personally, it obviously didn't come as a surprise that, institutions are here, like, wow, no surprise effect. Crypto native builders just need to adapt. They need to come to peace with the fact that they now have a new type of client to serve and they need to use their talent in a very proper manner. So that's probably my major takeaway. And also another thing which I absolutely loved, and I think Francesco mentioned it multiple times, is that thanks to AI, we now have amazing instruments at our fingertips to test the hypothesis very quickly and very effectively. So it's absolutely not the end of the era of crazy crypto experiments, I believe. So thanks again to Azeem, Francesco, Anya, and Simon for their time. And if you found this useful, share it with someone who's building. See you in the next one.